It's gray and cloudy today, and you know what that reminded me of? It reminded me of Forks, Washington. And you know what Forks, Washington reminded me of? I just finished reading the Twilight series for the first time as a major vampire enthusiast, so I am going to tell you about that today. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Cameron. I talk about books and the things I am reading and the things other people are reading. And today I wanted to tell you about a very influential series that I have actually never picked up before this past week. This is my presentation on my thoughts of the Twilight series, which I have named Where the Hell Have I Been, Loca? If you haven't already figured out, I have seen the movies before. I enjoy the movies. It's a tradition of my sisters and I to watch it. We watch it fairly frequently. I enjoy the movies. They are really entering their renaissance, because I know when they were actually coming out, they were getting like major hate. And now that we've had kind of 10 years to marinate on it a little bit, a lot of people would agree on the fact that they're pretty iconic. Because I watched those, I decided that I wanted to read the books. That, and I did a reading vlog where my family recommended books to me, and the one my older sister Kate recommended to me was Twilight. So I read the first Twilight. I did a vlog on that. If you want to hear my initial first book thoughts, you can go to that video. I am basically going to give you like a breakdown of each book and what I thought about it. It's not going to be like a summary. This is not the video you want to watch for a summary. This is entirely a video based in my own opinion. I also love that a lot of times when I make these videos, I truly just yap and the only person who gets to hear it is my sister. She's probably going to put this part in the video just to expose me. So, the first section for the first book. Hold on tight, Spider Monkey. We are in the first book, Twilight. If you somehow have lived under a rock and haven't heard anything about Twilight, it details the story of a girl named Bella Swan who just moved from Arizona to Forks, Washington, where her father lives. So, it's her she's going to complete the last 2 years of high school there because her mom's new husband has a traveling job. When she gets there, she meets a mysterious family called the Cullen family. And there is a bunch of them. There's 7 of them. The mom and dad are Esme and Carlisle, Emmett, Rosalie, Jasper, Alice, and Edward. Okay? Edward is the important one. And basically, it is the story, I feel like I should say this before we get into the thing. Bella is 16. Edward, who you find out in the book is a vampire, he's not really a vampire. I'll break that down in a second. But Edward is also 17, and he's been like permanently frozen at the age of 17. God, I can't think of anything worse than being permanently frozen at the age of 17. So, I'm a big vampire fan. And I love vampire literature. One of my favorite books of all time is, as a matter of fact, one of the first vampire books, Dracula. What Edward is not Dracula. They actually say many times in the book that Edward doesn't even have fangs. Some key differences between Twilight vampires and standard vampires. First of all, standard vampires very much are like depicted as evil. They're fully evil. Dracula did it. I'm pretty sure Carmilla did it. I'm actually reading that book next, so I will let you know if that's what she does. The big things about vampires. Vampires drink blood. This is something that they definitely do in Twilight also. Vampires drink, preferably, human blood. Most of the time, I think the big thing is they only drink human blood. I could be wrong. They also have, like, pale skin because they're not allowed out in the sun. In actual vampire lore, it's because the sun burns them. The vampires in Twilight actually can go outside. The goodness of sunlight doesn't destroy them. It makes them sparkle. Very fancy. Yeah, and then they also, like, the vampires don't have fangs, and there's like this whole aspect of control. Like, a lot of newborn vampires can't control themselves when they first get turned. But what's interesting about the Cullens is they're vegetarian vampires, and that doesn't mean they aren't consuming products of animals. They actually only drink animal blood, not people blood. So that makes their eyes different. Most vampires in this world have red eyes. The Cullens have golden eyes. The first Twilight book, I feel I should say, other than the vampire lore, because let's be honest, most of the vampire lore we have are actually more aligned with maybe like fae creatures or even like angel characters. But Twilight also does have werewolves. We will talk about it when we get into the book that actually involves that. which is not the first book. Good old Stephanie, the author, decided to put werewolves in. They get like one line of mention in this book. This book it's not got a lot of the problems that a lot of people like to complain about when it comes to this series. This book is actually very fun, especially if you approach it from the perspective of the thing I said earlier, where like neither of the main characters, Bella or Edward, have developed frontal lobes. Honestly, a lot of this book I enjoyed, particularly before she was with Edward. Bella is actually kind of a fun character in the sense that she really is just a teenage girl doing teenage girl things. She's like vibing. And weird stuff is like happening to her and she's entirely responding to it. It seems like she has a touch of mental illness where she, like, you can throw anything at her and she's like, okay. Like, she figures out that there's this whole like crew of vampires in this tiny little town, and instead of doing the thing that I feel like a lot of us would do, which is, oh my gosh, there is 7 vampires in this town with a population of like maybe 1,000 people. That's not a good thing. She's just like pretty rad. It's so interesting because like 60-70% of that book is just her being like, I'm pretty sure that guy's a vampire. And then in the last 30% of the book you actually get plot. So you get like oh, now Bella and Edward are together. And that's when it starts getting really annoying, is like they get together and like within the same day they're like, I love you, I would do anything for you, I would die for you, rah rah rah. Like they immediately go 0 to 100 being like, I'm devoting my entire life to you at 16 years old. And then you start to see a pattern occur in the first book that you see throughout most of the rest of the series, which is essentially people hunt Bella because of her connections to the Cullens. Or because, maybe I should say, because she is very aware that vampires actually exist. And she's immortal. So in this book, you've got Laurent and James and Victoria hunting her, and then the Cullens save her. By the end of the book, she's like, I want you to turn me, Edward, like make me a vampire. Which honestly, just teenage behavior. Not thinking about anything of the future and being like, yeah, I could be permanently frozen at 16 years old. So, let's move on to the second book in the series, which is New Moon. Oh look, hello.
Hello?
I am recording a Twilight video right now, and I feel like I have to ask you, that song that plays during Bella's depression sequence, what is it?
Oh god, oh god, oh no. Oh no.
Is it the There's a Possibility song, or is it a different one?
I think it is.
Okay.
Hold on. There's a possibility. I think it is a possibility.
Okay, cool. Anyway, that was Kate, my older sister, who told me to read the first Twilight. So, the next book, this is where the problems begin to happen. This is the second book of the series. It's New Moon. What happens in New Moon? She turns 18 in this book. One of the very first scenes is her talking about how much she hates her birthday, but all the Cullens are having a birthday party for her. So they invite her over, and she's opening gifts, and she cuts her finger on a paper and starts bleeding. And then Jasper, one of Edward's brothers, attacks her, or attempts to attack her. And then Edward, showing one of his worst qualities, Edward freaks out. And because these people live forever and they don't age, they have to move on every few years just to like make sure no one's suspicious of them for never aging. Like they can't stay in one place for 50 years and then have all of the locals of that town be like, these people haven't aged in 50 years, what? That all coincides, and Edward's basically like, Bella, I'm breaking up with you because we have to leave town, because it's dangerous for you, and also because we need to move on now. I think at this point, they have been together 4 or 5 months. I don't think they've been together very long. The Cullens leave town. They are apart for 7 months. During that time, she goes through a severe depression. This section is called There's a Possibility, because the song that plays in the movie is There's a Possibility, and it's just that over and over. Then she goes to visit her buddy, who I didn't mention in the first book of Twilight because he's in one scene, and the only thing he does in that is like, hey, maybe you should contemplate the fact that the Cullens might be vampires. Jacob is kind of a rat. He can't keep a secret for the life of him, because he's basically the one who's like, Bella, these people are vampires. So that's what he does in the first book. Bella, in the second book, in New Moon, after she's depressed, she's like, I have to do something to lift me out of this depression. I'm going to buy a motorcycle. Because now I'm an adrenaline junkie. And you know who can fix my motorcycle? Jacob Black. Jacob Black lives in La Push on a reservation.
Because he is Native American. I cannot remember what tribe he is a part of.
It is based on a real tribe up in that region. And every part of how it's handled in this stupid series is just disrespectful. Like, just the entire after you become the wolf, you cut your hair, when in most Native American, like, cultures, they don't cut their hair unless they're in mourning. Like, actually, in the movies, I think they actually cast a actor who was indigenous. And they were like, by the way, you'll have to cut your hair. And he was like, that's literally disrespectful, I won't do it. So he had to drop out. Anyway, she spends a lot of time with Jacob, and then Jacob, like, kind of hits a certain age, and then he becomes a vampire because he's the descendant of one of the first vampires. Nope, not vampires, werewolves. Bella, who's an adrenaline junkie now, she figures out that she hears Edward's voice when she makes a bad decision. So she starts doing crazy stuff like going on motorcycle rides and approaching strange men. And she jumps off a cliff because she's cliff diving. They save her or whatever, and everyone's like, why did you try to kill yourself? And she was like, I didn't do that. I simply wanted to go cliff diving. And she, like, maintains that. She's like, I actually didn't want to kill myself. I just wanted to go cliff diving. This book treats self-inflicted harm and death very oddly. Because, like, the first chapter of this book, Edward's like, yeah, I kind of want to die. And then there's this crazy miscommunication. And honestly, probably one of the only times where I've been like, this is an excellent use of the miscommunication trope. Because one of Charlie, her father's friends, dies very suddenly. And so, after Bella jumps off the cliff, Edward calls her house, and Jacob picks up the phone. And Edward is like, where's Charlie? And so Jacob responds, because he assumes someone in town is calling him, responds with, oh, he's at the funeral. And then Edward hangs up. He didn't think to be like, hey, where's Bella? So he takes that as a confirmation that Bella is dead, and then he goes to find the Volturi. And the Volturi are like the ultimate law, the Supreme Court of vampires. And he's like, I'm going to Italy to approach the Volturi to see if they can finish me off, because I don't want to be alive without Bella. Yeah, this all happens in a very close sequence of each other. It's the same situation where like 70% of the book doesn't really have a lot of plot, and then 30% does. Alice comes back to Forks to like check on Bella. And also, I feel like I should say one important thing is I think this series would have been significantly better.
Even though I know the author of it, who is very religious, would never do something like this.
This series would have been significantly better if Bella and Alice got together. Edward's sister, Alice. But anyway, she flies to Italy and stops him from having the Volturi kill him. It's Alice, Bella, and Edward all there in the court of the Volturi. And they're all like, hey, you should join us Volturi, to Alice and Edward. And then they're also like, hey, we have these weird mind powers. Oh, I forgot to mention that. Alice tells the future and Edward reads minds. And Edward has never been able to read Bella's mind. And so the Volturi see Bella and they're like, none of our powers are working on you. Despite the fact that Alice's powers work on Bella. Anyway, they're like, hey, you could be really useful if you turn. You know our secret, you need to be turned, or we're going to kill you. And Bella's like, cool, yes, perfect. And then at the end of the book, she's like, okay, Edward, when are we going to turn me? And he's like, well, definitely after graduation. And she's like, cool. And then he's like, also, I've been religious this whole time, so I think we need to get married. Something that they don't tell us until that point. And they always describe it as old-fashioned more than anything. Like, he's just old-fashioned. Like, he doesn't want to hanky-panky before marriage. And he doesn't want to turn Bella into an immortal creature who, in the grand scheme of things, marriage doesn't seem like it's that important to vampires because marriage is not infinite. And that's how Bella feels. Bella's like, I don't think marriage is required, but Edward's like, no, I'm religious. all of a sudden, so we need to get married. So this is where a lot of the religious aspects come into it. Also, after Edward at the start of the book starts being like, I've thought about unaliving myself, Bella and Carlisle, his father, have a really actually kind of sweet conversation about like faith and stuff like that. And Carlisle's like, I believe we vampires can live full lives, like full health, and I think we can still be good, but Edward believes that we don't have souls after we get turned, so like death is finite. I don't know. Edward gets very religious in this book after showing no signs of being religious, and he once again doesn't drop any names of any religions. Anyway, by the end of the book, they're engaged, and they're both, she is 18, he's technically like 119 or something. I don't remember his exact age. He's over 100. But she's 18 and engaged to this guy, and they're planning on getting married pretty soon after they graduate high school. As your friendly local early 20s person, don't get married right after high school. Anyway, let's move on to Eclipse, the worst book of the series. I realize I didn't say this at the start of the video, so I feel like I should say it now. I only read the original 4 books.
I know technically this is a 5-book series now that Midnight Sun has come out.
But anyway, we are on the 3rd book, which is Eclipse. I've named this section The World's Ugliest Engagement Ring, and then did an artist's rendition of it. I saw this engagement ring in the movie, and I was like, wow, that is an ugly engagement ring. And then I read the book, and it was described the exact same way. I was mad. I was so mad. So, if we remember, at the end of New Moon, Edward is basically like, so I won't turn you unless we get married. Which I guess means they're engaged. Another thing that was kind of happening in New Moon that wasn't really happening. So James, the guy who was originally going to kill Bella in the first book, the Cullens killed James. Victoria was James's mate. So now Victoria was pissed that Edward killed James. And so she was like, a mate for a mate. So she's been trying to kill Bella.
She doesn't really actually make an appearance in the second book. Like, she's like a threat, and Bella's like, oh my gosh, Victoria's coming to kill me. And then she like never actually shows up.
But now she's really a threat in the 3rd book. She's like crossing into the werewolves' territory, and the werewolves, of course, hate the vampires. Once again, kind of touching back on Dracula. Dracula is a werewolf in the sense that he can shapeshift into a wolf. He does so several times in the original book. I feel like I should say that. But anyway, because of course, the werewolves and the vampires are enemy because they have to be. But they have very clear boundary lines. Like the Cullens are allowed to be over here and the werewolves are in the reservation and the areas around it. Victoria keeps getting into the La Push reservation kind of area. And so the werewolves keep having to chase her off. And they're like, hey Bella, what's going on? Bella's like, Victoria's trying to kill me. And they're like, okay, so what are we gonna do about it? A lot of the book is just kind of politicking between the werewolves and the vampires. Jacob became a douchebag after he turned into a werewolf. And he thinks he's in charge of Bella. So now we've got 2 unbearable men that Bella has to deal with. The only 2 valid men in this stupid series are Charlie and Carlisle. Jacob's whole thing is like, I want to be 100% honest with you. I want you to know everything that I'm thinking. Like, I want to keep you in the loop because I do think you should be safe, but I think you should be allowed to make your own decisions. In theory, great, a good trait. Edward, on the other hand, is like, I will let you know things on a need-to-know basis, and I need to protect you. They're both on the extreme ends of the same scale. Jacob, it makes it very clear to Bella, at some point in the story, he's like, by the way, I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you like the entire time. You should leave your vampire boyfriend, who you dated for less time than you guys were broken up. Jacob's like, I know you better than anyone, which is not untrue because she and Jacob are best friends. But he very much does this thing where he like pits himself against Edward constantly, and it's deeply annoying. So Ella will be like, I just want to hang out with my best friend Jake, and then he'll make the entire thing about like, well, if you were with me. He's like super pick me. But this is where I have issues with the love triangle, of course. Because neither of these men are really acting in her best interest. Like, Edward is actively withholding information from her. And Jacob's like, hey, you should be with me, I'm gonna manipulate you. And then he turns around and he's like, Edward is being manipulative, which isn't untrue, but it's like, the kettle is calling the pot black here. buddy. Yeah, so most of the movie they're just prepping for Victoria to come and try and kill Bella, because the Cullens are like, Bella, you're family, and then the werewolves are all like, Jake likes Bella, so we'll fight for her too. And then there are several times where Jacob like advances on her, like he kisses her, but because he's like a big werewolf boy, she like tries to punch him to like defend herself and breaks her own hand. She has like very little autonomy in this book. Anyway, they fight against Victoria and they win. Also, you find out that Jasper, one of the Cullen siblings, who is also dating Alice, another reason why I think Alice and Bella should have been together, you find out Jasper is was definitely a Confederate soldier. Ew. Yeah, anyway, this whole book just, the entire time I was reading it, I would call my sisters and then be like, so Alice and Bella should definitely be together, right? And they were like, yeah, definitely. So anyway, now we'll get into Breaking Dawn. Welcome to the final book, which the first half is just horrendous. It has pretty much all of the exact same problems that Eclipse has. And then the second half is actually kind of rad. I wish we got a lot more of the story being that, but we didn't. So anyway, this section is called You Nicknamed My Daughter After the Loch Ness Monster, which is, I feel like I should tell you, a real line that is said in the book. So now that Bella and Edward are engaged and they have officially graduated high school, they have to get married. Yippee! So the first section is we're married now. Also, Jacob got so mad at her rejecting him because it never really was a love triangle. And I feel like this is the case with a lot of famous love triangles. Most of the time the author very clearly is this is the preferred guy. And also there's this guy that I think of as my brother, but maybe we could get together. That's how she feels about Jacob. But anyway, she rejects Jacob for the 47th time and is like, Edward and I are getting married. And Jacob's like, I'm gonna go live as a wolf for several months. So Jacob has been living as wolves for several months while she's planning this wedding, and she misses him. But she and Edward get married, and Jacob shows up to the wedding, and he's like, well, I clearly can't convince you to stop it now because you're already married, but I do miss you. They get married, they go on their honeymoon. They're on their honeymoon for 3 weeks. And somehow, Edward, who's been perpetually frozen, doesn't need to have a heartbeat, doesn't really need to have blood flowing through his veins, somehow he impregnates Bella with this half-vampire, half-human baby. And this storyline is very odd. It's very, you could see the religious influence because it's very pro-life. As soon as Bella realizes she's pregnant, she's like, I have to protect this baby. And meanwhile, it's quite literally a parasite. It's literally killing her. And so everyone's like, maybe you should just get rid of the baby. And she's like, no, it's my baby. Despite the fact that in the book, she's like, I've actually never thought about having kids before. The only amount I thought ahead was that I was going to get married to Edward. On their honeymoon, after they find out she's pregnant, she gets very pregnant very, very fast. It's accelerated. There's actually kind of a fun segment in the middle of Breaking Dawn where it's Jacob's point of view, and it's entirely werewolf politics. And all the werewolves are like, well, should we go ahead and kill Bella to get rid of this monster that they've created? And then Jacob leaves the pack because he's not the alpha, but he's supposed to be. So he starts his own pack and 2 of his buddies come join him. And they basically spend their time protecting the vampires. While Bella is pregnant and going to give birth to this creature that no one has ever experienced before. She names her daughter Renesmee. Okay? Esme for Edward's mom and Renee for her mom. So Renesmee. So if you ever hear a Twilight fan talking about Renaissance or anything like that, that's Renesmee. And it's a terrible name, and everyone in the book knows it, so everyone in the book calls her Nessie. So that's the first half of the entire book. It's not fun. That was not a fun segment until we got to the werewolf politics part. Anyway, she gives birth to the baby. The baby snaps her spine, and she actually dies in childbirth, but not before they turn her into a vampire. Anyway, one of the Cullen sisters, Rosalie, whose only personality in this book is, I wish I could have had a baby instead of being a vampire. So when Bella gets pregnant, her whole personality becomes, I'm here to protect Bella's baby. But Rosalie is taking care of the baby, and Jacob is really mad because he's like, this baby killed my best friend, I'm gonna kill this baby. And then he looks at the baby and he imprints on the baby. Imprinting is essentially like, oh, you know who your soulmate is. But this is a minutes-old baby. Ew. The second half of Breaking Dawn is what I want this whole series to be, because it's actually kind of fun. Lots of plot happens. Bella is finally evenly matched. Both of her love interests stop being annoying as soon as she becomes a vampire, which almost makes me think she should have been a vampire very quickly. We haven't forgotten about the Volturi. So the Volturi, a while ago, were like, she needs to become a vampire. She's not allowed to live and know our secret. So Bella's like, okay, I know that I need, like, this needs to happen. So they're expecting the Volturi to come check up on them. Renaissance, is growing so fast that they're not sure what to do with her. Bella is unconscious for 3 days, turning into a vampire, and wakes up, and it looks like Nessie is several months old by the time she wakes up. So she's growing very fast. She starts looking like a child, and vampire children are absolutely banned. Like, the vampires are like, this is unethical, we should not force children to be vampires for the rest of the time. Which is crazy because Edward is definitely 17 years old. They're super illegal, and someone sees Nessie out and about, and they're like, that's an immortal child, we need to execute. So the Volturi, along with having to come check that Bella is a vampire now, they have to now be like, alright, so we're killing this immortal child. So the entire second half of the book is just them gaining witnesses to the fact that Renesmee is in fact not an immortal child, and she is growing, and preparing for a potential battle that could happen against the Volturi. And then the Volturi come and they see that Renesmee is not an immortal child, but then they're like, we don't know what she is, we should kill her anyway. And then Alice comes and saves the day with her future predicting powers. Is this the most engaging book I've ever read? No. Did I actually have fun with some of the plot? Yeah. It didn't, especially the last book doesn't necessarily follow the 70% very few plot, 30% a lot of plot. But it's certainly not as bad as maybe you would expect. Now, there are definitely some religious themes that live throughout the series, but all in all, it was a lot less annoying than maybe I thought it would be. Do I recommend teenagers actually read this series? No. But is it fun for adults to, like, read the series for jokes and stuff like that? Yes. I actually did enjoy reading it. By far not the worst book series I've read this entire year. I think I gave most of them like 3.5 stars. Like, they really weren't bad. They were very neutral. Are there other series I would recommend over it? Sure. But was it kind of fun? Yeah. That's a lot of my thoughts. Don't go to the series if you're looking for strong female leads, excellent plot, or accurate werewolf. Well, accurate and respectful werewolf and vampire lore. But my god, is it fun.
Also, everything that you could get out of this book series, you could also get from the movies. And the movies take less time and are more fun to consume.
Anyway, thank you all so much for watching today. I hope you enjoyed just me rambling on and on and on and on about Twilight. If you liked this video, give it a little like. If you've seen one or more of my videos and enjoyed them, maybe you'd like more of my videos, so maybe you should subscribe. Comment thank you Ellie down below, because she did in fact do the editing on this video. Ellie is my little sister. She is a saint sometimes. And also, tell me if you've read this series before, or if anything I said makes you think differently about the series, if you haven't read it, or if I've encouraged you to watch the movies, because the movies are actually really fun. So, what do I got today? Take an umbrella outside with you, since it's raining outside of where I am right now. Don't nickname someone's daughter after the Loch Ness Monster, and go visit and support your local library. I will see you all later. Goodbye!